Welcome to Up on Game presents Taylor Scouting. Coach Randy Taylor is bringing his 40-plus years of knowledge to you. This is Taylor Scouting. And now, here's Coach Randy Taylor.
This is Coach Randy Taylor, and you're with the Taylor Scouting Podcast on Up on Game presents on the iHeart app, on all the app or different podcast apps that you use to find your podcasts. We are going to talk about with Leigh Steinberg, and we're going to talk about Leigh a little bit. Doesn't need a lot of introduction. And then we're going to talk about the NIL, and that's everybody in this nowadays goes from the recruiting to transfer portal to NIL, and we're on to the NIL. And so I'm going to use my 40 years of experience at UCLA, Minnesota, Illinois, and my background in recruiting and evaluating, and hopefully we can do these great podcasts for you. Please rate and review us and follow us on social network on Up on Game Presents, Up on Game Network, and our Taylor FB Scout is my Twitter handle. I think we got all the business out of the way, so we'll start talking to Leigh. Really appreciate you being on with me, Leigh.
My pleasure.
Huge fan. And Steinberg Sports and Entertainment and LeighSteinbergSpeaks.com. Are those your main ways of finding you?
Right. It's Leigh at SteinbergSpeaks.com, and then on all your usual platforms of content supply.
Yeah, like we're all on now, right?
Yeah.
And so, Leigh, I have a long history with you, and have really enjoyed getting to know your son, Matt, too. And back in the very, very early days of your work as an agent, you actually had me as one of your most glamorous clients back in 1979 when I came out of Illinois. And how long ago? When did you start?
In 1975, I had gone a year to UCLA, then up to Cal Berkeley, and undergrad and law school. And then I was student body president in law school, and the governor of California was Ronald Reagan. So I learned everything I needed to learn about negotiations from dealing with Governor, later President Reagan, who was not real thrilled about protests against the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And I was a dorm counselor in an undergrad dormitory, and they moved the freshman football team into the dorm. And one of the students was the quarterback, Steve Bartkowski. And after I graduated from law school, I traveled the world for a while. And then in 1975, Bartkowski was the very first pick in the first round of the NFL draft by the Atlanta Falcons. And he asked me to represent him. And there really was not a settled field of sports representation. Teams could hang up the phone and say, we don't deal with agents. So there was no guaranteed right for a while. But we ended up getting the largest rookie contract in NFL history. And I discovered then, Randy, that my dad had raised me with two core values: treasure relationships, especially family, and make a meaningful difference in the world and help people who could not help themselves. And so I saw that the athlete profile was so high that I thought if they would retrace their roots and go back to the high school community, set up a scholarship fund, or work with the church or Boys and Girls Club, they could lay down roots and make a difference. At the collegiate institution, you had players like Troy Aikman endow a full scholarship fund and stay close to the alums. At the professional level, we asked each player to find some cause they'd like to tackle, and then to set up a charitable foundation with leading business figures, political figures, and community leaders. So it's worked on the running back who played for Tampa and Atlanta, Homes for the Holidays, who just put the 200 single mother into the first home they'll ever own. It's Patrick Mahomes, 15 in the Mahomies, so where he helps at-risk kids. So at any rate, that was 48 years ago, and I ended up doing baseball and basketball, and in football had 64 first-round draft picks, and the very first pick in the draft 8 years, and 12 players in the NFL in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
You know, I was reading about different things that you've done, and I've always kept track of you. And the one thing that I remember somebody said is that you were talking about the player's heart and the difference they could make well before anybody else was when they were representing athletes.
I think that was Cameron Crowe, who was the writer-director of Jerry Maguire that I worked with him on. But the most important skill, Randy, in life very often is not suasion or how you speak or how you pitch or how you sell. It's listening. It's drawing out another human being and understanding their deepest anxieties and fears and their greatest hopes and dreams. And it's careful listening so that you get to the heart of what another human being is feeling. And if you can put yourself in another person's heart and mind and see the world the way they see it, you can navigate your way through life gracefully and really have an impact in fulfilling people.
Yeah, that's what I've always admired as much as anything about you was, and I think your son Matt, to throw him a little publicity too. He's a great kid, and you have the feeling and the heart and all of that stuff that you talked about.
Matt's a wonderful son. He's really, really bright. He knows much more about football than I do. You can ask him what was the order of the 1994 NFL draft, and he'll go through it one by one. And he's got a great heart and a lot of compassion.
That's awesome. How did back up? How did Jerry Maguire come about?
So I got a call in 1993 from writer-director Cameron Crowe. And he had gone underground in a Los Angeles high school to do a book that became a movie called Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I thought was hilarious. So he asked if he could follow me around and be a fly on the wall so he could pick up atmosphere for a film based on a sports agent. So he went to the 93 draft with me, where Drew Bledsoe I had as a client as the first pick. He came to league meetings where I was showing off a player, Tim McDonald, to different teams. He came to Pro Scouting Day at SC. He came to the Super Bowl and Super Bowl party. And he went to a number of games with me. And I told him lots and lots of stories. And then as technical advisor, my job was to vet the script to make sure the willing suspension of disbelief that holds you in a movie where, as a good sports fan, you don't think the look is wrong, you don't think the dialogue's phony. So I had to do that. And then he assigned me some actors like Cuba Gooding Jr., and I took him down to a Super Bowl, and all week he had to pretend he was a wide receiver. He hung out with Desmond Howard and Monty Toomer. And so, you know, it's been 25 years, and I've rarely gone out in public where someone doesn't run up and either ask me to say 4 words or say the words to me that start with "Show me the."
Exactly right. And it's been. I remember the scene. I think when you're talking about the Super Bowl party. And you still do that, right? That you're at like 35th year you've been doing the Super Bowl party?
It's actually the 36th. So
36th.
we're going to raise money this year. Last year we had it because it was Los Angeles at Sony Studios, the old MGM. And this year it's going to be at a minor league baseball park. We're doing some innovative things. We're having a brain body lounge where new modalities like hyperbaric oxygen and light stem that hypes up energy. These are all modalities I think can help teams with greater performance in the fourth quarter, that can help restore players that are injured back more quickly. There are new breakthroughs. So we're going to exhibit that. We have a concussion seminar that will involve neurologists, and so it's big business, politics, sports, entertainment, all in one heady brew, but we're trying to do some good too.
Yeah, when you talk about the headache, the concussions and things, we just saw what happened with DeMar Hamlin, a little bit different. The heart striking the heart at a weird time. So there's so many of those injuries, and I know you've always been up on that and trying to help these athletes get through.
Well, I had a crisis of conscience back in the late 80s because I was representing half the quarterbacks in the NFL, and they kept getting hit in the head. We'd go to doctors and ask how many or too many, what's the magic number, and they had no answers. So I started holding conferences where we got the answers, and we finally found out that 3 or more concussions occasions an exponentially higher rate of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, premature senility, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and depression. And I vowed to try to find some cure. So I found 2 different types of treatments. One's called RTMS that can bring back a brain that's had traumatic brain injury. The concept's neuroplasticity, that you can actually regrow neurons in the brain. There's another one with Dr. Tommy Shavers in Orlando, Florida, that's called Nestri brain training. So I think we're making some advances on this, and if we can get the right, hyperbaric oxygen also has an effect. And I think that we're got to keep pushing forward on this issue.
So I'm here with Leigh Steinberg, who is the real life Jerry Maguire. I don't know if that's appropriate, but I was reading up on you, Leigh, and some quotes from some people. Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, says, "You better get someone to get the job done, and Leigh Steinberg can." The California Sports Hall of Fame calls you the undisputed greatest sports agent of all time, and Forbes says the greatest sports agent in history. So I wanted to just be sure that we threw that in. You know, this is my time in the segment to promote Leigh Steinberg, my friend and somebody that I look up to. Leigh, let's talk about the current state of college football and the NIL, which is name, image, and likeness. I know that you guys are involved in that a little bit. It's really not sure how it's going to all turn out, but maybe you can give us a brief overview of what the NIL is.
So for years, players that came from disadvantaged backgrounds had a hard time living on scholarship checks. And players that came from middle-class families could do much better. And they would sit on a campus and realize they weren't able to work to supplement their income, and become resentful about big crowds, big TV contracts, their jersey number sold in the student store. And the NCAA could have reacted much more quickly in not paying them like the Sultan of Brunei, but giving them enough money to equalize how they did with the other non-athletes on the campus, but they didn't. So California in 2021 passed a law called SB 206, which gave California athletes the right to hire marketing agents for name, image, and likeness. So this was a complete shift from before, when athletes were not able to make any money except what came through the scholarship check. The rest of the country got scared because they thought California would now have the ability to recruit and attract the best athletes. So they pressured the NCAA, which in July of 2021 went ahead and passed a rule that said all athletes at the collegiate ranks could do this and hire. Well, a revolution has occurred,
Right.
because what has happened is that the Bryce Young made $3.4 million. Caleb Williams made 2.2, but much broader than that, it was female athletes, with Phil Knight giving every athlete at Oregon a stipend. It was Jack in the Box giving 15 athletes named Jack the ability to get a stipend. And what happened was that alums gathered together who were running their own businesses and pooled a substantial amount of money at schools like SC and Ohio State and Alabama and the big football powers, and were able to use that in recruiting, which no one anticipated. So the point is, they could go to a high school student and say, and if you come to Alabama, we guarantee you'll make a couple $1 million off the field. So it began to separate the haves from the have-nots in football, and the Power 5 conferences had a huge advantage. The second thing it did, Randy, is move the age of professionalism for athletes to a much younger point. So all of a sudden, Bryce Young, when he's a high school senior, signs an NIL, or at the very beginning. And high school players now are branding themselves, figuring out social media, figuring out, and then going to agents. Well, imagine in our football practice, since the athletes can't come out in a draft till 3 years has passed since high school, we would meet a player in his junior year, maybe in his senior year. And now all of a sudden, if you don't sign a high school quarterback who looks to be someone with great promise, and you miss that window and he signs with another marketing director who also represents athletes at the pro level, then you will never get a chance to talk to him. So it moved every aspect of this younger and younger, to the point where Hoag Hospital's over here, and there's probably agents looking for maternity wards and looking for healthy mothers, right? You know, it's just gotten younger and younger, so it has a big effect. Now, will this keep players in school longer because they can now sit with a massive amount of money at college, so there's no pressure to come out into the pros? Will it make them move quicker? Will it allow them to back teams off who have drafted them? I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications to this, some of which were just unintended consequence.
Right.
And so I think where we're going in college football is, I think we're going to a real drop off between the Power 5 conferences, especially your SECs and Big Tens, and everybody else. And so those alums are contributing large amounts of money in these collectives and these loose organizations, and being able to enhance their alma mater's football program. I think what will happen is eventually these Power 5s are going to realize they don't need the NCAA, that they can negotiate the power lies in the conference, they can negotiate the TV contract. They don't have to split anything with the NCAA. And you'll see the Power Five conferences creating their own NCAA and their own rules and their own regulations.
You mentioned the collectives, and I think that's an interesting side of this, the creation of these collectives and these different companies. How does an athlete find an NIL deal? Is that possible?
Well, first of all, they can hire the recruiting process is going on. So the hottest athletes with the most promise are being approached by agents in high school. Right. So it's coming that way. But what we found here is that if you're in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, the 15th player on the Alabama football roster is a celebrity to someone. Right. So it's gone much deeper than we would have thought. Now, they're probably not doing a national ad, but they may be doing a $5,000 appearance at a car dealership or something, because any Alabama player is a celebrity to other people.
I saw that being an old Illinois lineman, I saw that there are 9 offensive linemen at Illinois who have a deal with a food or a restaurant, which makes sense, right? All the pizzas they can eat.
So you have individual endorsements, and then you have collective endorsements. And again, 81 of the top 100 shows last year on primetime television were NFL games. So this sport at the collegiate and professional level is not only the most popular sport, it's the most popular form of televised entertainment, which means that you've got this craze that you and I've never experienced in our lifetime. When you and I were younger, Randy, it was baseball that was the dominant sport. And now it's pro football, and right after that, college football. And so it's created this massive market where, for example, today's movie stars are NFL or college quarterbacks. Their name recognition is so high, and they cross over from just football to be household names.
What is the university's role in this? So Alabama or USC, how do they navigate through this?
They've taken a whole variety of different approaches. They're not supposed to directly be part of this, but in some cases they've signed off with marketing companies, or they've created some structure that allows all of their players to take advantage. The difficulty is it exposes the reality of the star system. So just consider this change. So you have Nick Saban at Alabama, and as a coach, his philosophy is always don't exalt one player over another, don't give too much publicity, give the player a chance to develop slowly on the field without all this external pressure. So in 2021, he announces that Bryce Young, his quarterback,
right,
has just gotten $1 million in deals. So this is antithetical to the way he's always coached. And what was he doing? He was recruiting.
No question.
And so when you saw the most traditional of coaches make that shift, it was you knew it was on.
Yeah. There's so many benefits to these athletes. Are there any unseen benefits that, other than the money that they can get, has this helped them become more interactive outside of the sport?
Well, I think that being able to speak and act and having to deal with financial issues at a younger age does help in maturation. In other words, I think there's a level at which this could prevent players from later making ridiculous financial decisions because they've already had financial literacy at a younger age. I think that the branding and marketing thing that is being done for athletes and athletes are doing for themselves emphasizes off the field skills that probably can take them into second career.
Yeah, makes sense. There are there, what are the downsides do you see of the NIL for the athlete and the school?
Well, it potentially could take away initiative from a young athlete who's already a millionaire at a younger age. I don't see that happening because athletes are so competitive, but that's one thing. The other thing is that if the quarterback's making $3.4 million in off the field income and the offensive lineman's making $1,000, it could create a level of friction on a squad. It, whatever the concept was in terms of amateurism that never was totally followed anyway. Remember that we used to have alums and agents give money to players under the table, but whatever that was, does it further and further separate these students from other people who are focusing on academics for second careers? Do they get as good an education? I mean, these are all possible problems. And then you could have athletes doing public exposure that wasn't particularly classy or didn't particularly go with products that are good for people.
Well, there are some products that are eliminated from the process. Is that correct?
Yes, and so you're still not supposed to have a contemporary athlete advertise alcohol. Gambling is a big no-no. So when you're seeing athletes involved in that, they're retired.
Yeah. Do you see that? What changes do you see coming?
Well, I think eventually you're going to see the legalization of gambling, and so whether or not they'll actually go up to a pari-mutuel type of booth in a stadium or just use their phones, I think that this is coming. It's always been there, but the fact that leagues were so strongly against any kind of thing, and now you have teams in Las Vegas, and now you have FanDuel being partly bought by. So I think you're going to see a more front and center gambling type of thing coming. I think you're again going to have better trained athletes. You're using things like hyperbaric oxygen and non-drug assists that will give them more energy and focus. I think we're getting more sophisticated in terms of all of that. I think the TV revenue has no limit because there's a loss leader aspect to it, meaning that someone who's bidding on college or pro football knows they can't return the rights fees they've paid by the amount of advertising, but it allows them to show promos for their Monday through Friday programming that enhances the bottom line in a network. Because one of the great things about football is that an advertiser knows that they're probably going to be watching their ads in real time. Because if you try to tape a game on an afternoon and make the assumption no one's going to tell you the score, probably not going to happen. So people tend to watch this different than other forms in real time.
Yeah, the last week we did a talk about the transfer portal, And so now I'm wondering, how does the transfer portal kids work into this NIL system?
That it works that they will go where the money is. And it once again reemphasizes the Power Five conferences are a big school because you have inherent recruiting advantages from the Alabamas and Clemsons and big power schools in Georgia. Anyway, but that just becomes more imbalanced because they have a second bite at the apple, which is they missed on recruiting the player out of high school, but they'll get him 2 years later because he'll transfer up. It'll be like junior college people going to four-year schools. That this will, and it'll mean more player movement. And players are less patient now than they've been before.
Yeah, no question about that. Is there an effect on how does the Title IX affect this whole process?
Well, the problem is that anything Title IX is part of how we got into this mess in the first place, because if the revenue programs like football on a college are the ones where there's pressure to try to enhance the athletes, everything necessary to do for a male athlete has to have an equal amount of things for female athletes. So it means that trying to provide colleges actually being the ones to distribute extra funds, it's not like they can just single out football or basketball and enhance their revenue. They have to do the same thing for women. I think it's admirable. I think it's really admirable. The support for many of the women's programs comes from the high revenue programs. Right. So the point is, when you see UCLA and SC transferring to Big Ten, they will argue that the extra TV money is enhancing women's sport and is making more opportunities available to them. Otherwise, the drift becomes that football and basketball reign supreme and the other programs don't get funded, so it's less opportunities. And we want women and girls to have the same opportunity to experience athletics that the men do.
Yeah, our sisters and daughters, right? So if I'm we'll wrap it up with this. So if I'm a group of five program, but I'm in an area where there is a bunch of revenue, whether it be agriculture or gambling or whatever this might be, can I, in a year or two, can I create a Power Five level program if I have enough money in the athletic department or the collective?
Yes, but it's a function of how many alums you have, how excited they are about their alma mater, how committed they are to funding a football or basketball program. And remember, it's always been true. People always fantasize about big markets and smaller markets. I guarantee if you're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that the buy rate on any products is much higher than it is in Los Angeles. Yeah. So the fact that it may be a smaller market doesn't mean that there'll be less opportunity necessarily. Look at the size of Alabama's market. I mean, we have more people in Orange County here than they have in the whole state, or maybe 1 million less. But the point is, but they do just fine because they have alums that are really excited. They have national followings and all the rest of it. So I don't think it's market size.
Yeah, it really is the wild, wild west, I think, of in athletics, college athletics right now. So we'll follow you and find out what you're doing, and that may lead us to to what we should be doing down the road. So, Leigh, I want to thank you for being on with us. Leigh, do you have anything you want to leave the group with, or follow you anywhere?
Well, if you're looking for education, we do agent academies. We're going to probably have the next one in Las Vegas. And if you go to steinbergspeaks.com, we have all sorts of educational initiatives for younger people that might want to have a career in sports. And it's not just agency, it's working for a team, a league, a conference, an athletic department, working in marketing, PR, television, journalism. So you might want to check on that.
I sure appreciate it. Again, thanks for being on. This was with Leigh Steinberg of Steinberg Sports and Entertainment, and SteinbergSpeaks.com, LeighSteinbergSpeaks.com. Thanks, Leigh, for being on with us. We just want to remind everybody to subscribe to Up on Game Presents on the iHeart Radio app or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate and review us, please. Follow us on all of your social platforms by searching the Up on Game Network. Follow me at rTaylorFBScout on Twitter. Great to have you. And Taylor Scouting will be back for another show about recruiting and college football and everything related.